Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
We would like to thank Woodbine for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB. Woodbine's 2023 Thoroughbred Stakes program has more than $17 million in purses, including 39 graded stakes, 5 Grade 1 events, and 2 $1 million classics, the King's Plate and the Woodbine Mile. Woodbine, now through December, great racing north of the border. Good morning and welcome to Racing Across America on this Sunday morning, the day after the second leg of the Triple Crown. Unfortunately, no shot at the Triple Crown this season as Mage is beaten. National Treasure gets it done, and we'll have some Preakness conversation and go back talk maybe a little Balck-Eyed Susan as well. And who better to talk Maryland racing with than our friend Frank Vespe of the RacingBiz.com. If you want to follow racing in Maryland and the Mid-Atlantic region in general, check out the RacingBiz.com. But we invited Frank in to talk yesterday and the day before down at Pimlico. Frank, good morning.
Good morning, Seth. Good to be with you.
Yeah, happy to have you on board. And we talked with John Piasek yesterday and recapped a little bit of the Friday action and got some previews from him. And I know he had picks up on your website. But when we talked to him yesterday, he was saying the forecast said maybe a chance of rain late in the day. But watching the simulcast signal all afternoon, I was out in the front half of our clubhouse racebook here. And it looked like it wound up to be a picture-perfect day. Just give us a little overall. What was the crowd like? What was the weather like?
Yeah, well, we'll start with the weather. We were pretty fortunate. It actually did rain, but it rained after the races.
Okay.
So we had it was overcast, but then the sun came out and it ended up being a pretty nice day all in all. And like I said, it rained late, but I think the concert goers probably weren't too happy about that. But those of us who were just there for the racing, we were fine. So that worked out well. The crowd was kind of sparse, honestly, for a Preakness. I'm going to guess this was the smallest or second smallest I've seen. And I think there are a lot of factors there, one of which is they've raised the prices quite a bit, and they say they're trying to sort of reposition the Preakness as a little bit different kind of event than the one that for years and years is sort of a Baltimore rite of passage.
Pegasus didn't show up yesterday
here and went to the Preakness, and they're trying to sort of reposition it. So I think smaller crowds are going to be the norm, but this was a fairly light crowd.
I would say a new look to the Preakness. No Pegasus yesterday.
Sadly, I think Pegasus may be at Old Friends these days. We haven't seen him around Pimlico in a while.
Oh, I like that. That's very good. And talk a little bit about, before we get into, Preakness and Balck-Eyed Susan, because talking about repositioning and whatnot, maybe you're alluding to it a little bit. And again, you're down there covering Maryland racing. There has certainly been some noise over the past, few weeks. And I'm just wondering what you're hearing. And nationally, it seems like Maryland racing may be in for some big changes in the next few years. And Pimlico may be the place. I mean, a few years ago, Pimlico seemed to be on the outs, and Laurel was taking all the laurels, so to speak. And now it seems to have switched around. What does it look like overall, being on the ground down there in Maryland?
It looks like an insane asylum. Yeah, pretty much what it looks like. So in very, very brief terms, a few years ago, the Stronach Group made a big push to try to get state support to turn Laurel into what Tim Ridfeld liked to call a super track. And that was going to be the death knell for Pimlico. And the ultimate effect of that was to really galvanize Baltimore City politicians who hold a lot of sway in the state. You've got Baltimore is, the biggest city by far in the state and one of the biggest jurisdictions. And so that really galvanized their politicians to come together around the idea that they needed to save Pimlico and they need to keep the Preakness at Pimlico in Baltimore. And what that has meant since is now really all the all the kind of political momentum is behind the idea that Pimlico's got to survive. And realistically, and you're seeing the same thing in New York with Belmont and Aqueduct, years ago, owning a racetrack was basically a license to print money.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore. And, racing in Maryland just doesn't generate sufficient revenue to justify having two, sort of full-size racetracks within 20 miles of each other. And so realistically, one track survives and one doesn't. And at this moment, it looks like it's Pimlico that's going to survive. And now at the same time, and you're sort of suggesting this as well, the legislature in the last session passed a bill creating a racetrack operating authority. And that really is going to be, to a not insignificant extent, could end up being both the racetrack operator and to some extent the racetrack regulator, which it's a little bit of a curious creature that they've created. But the basic premise there is, the Stronach Group has said that they're willing, if not even inclined, to be out of the day-to-day racing in Maryland business. They've said they want to keep the Preakness, but a lot of people think that they really want to be out of the Maryland business altogether. And the feeling among horsemen and other people close to the industry is, given that there are there's no alternative gaming at racetracks, it's not a very attractive play for a private investor to want to buy the Maryland Jockey Club. So the idea is that this racetrack operating authority may be able to step in if there is no private operator who wants to come in and kind of run racing. And so, what Maryland racing could look like in a few years, as you said, it could be very, very different from what it is. And then overlay on top of all this, there's no contract between the horsemen and the racetrack after June 30.
Ooh.
So is racing, I don't think anybody's looking at that and saying racing will end forever, but it might shut down for a little while they try to sort this stuff out. So there's just a lot of moving parts on the ground in Maryland right now. And then, Seth, and I'm giving you the longest answer in the history of long answers, and I apologize for that, but then coming from Churchill, where you had all the horse deaths and PETA and HISA and all these things, I can tell you all the chatter on the backstretch at Pimlico was, for the most part this week, not, man, isn't it great to have these great horses here? It was, what's the future in Maryland? What's going to happen with horse deaths? Is the Preakness too close to the Kentucky Derby? What are we going to do about all this stuff? And so it was kind of the Preakness that was about everything except the running of the Preakness.
Well, no, and I appreciate that answer, and that's kind of why I asked, because I was going to lead into that a little bit as well. But over the past, month and a half or whatever, reading, and for people who've been around the game for as long as I have, Maryland was always one of the, the cornerstones of the racing industry in the country, and we celebrated some of the names of it yesterday with guys like Jim McKay, who kind of kicked off the state-bred programs with the Maryland Millions, and so Maryland has always been very, very important. And just reading over the past month or so, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Certainly, it seemed like over the past year and a half, Maryland had gotten back in good footing, but now that has kind of turned the corner once again. And so, again, we'll keep our fingers crossed. But as you say, I was also going to ask a little bit of how the week was. You've kind of led into that as well, and rather than wait for the race, because we'll recap some of the races, but maybe just give us a little bit of a feeling yesterday. Bob Baffert captures two of the stakes. He wins the Sir Barton with Arabian Lion. He wins the Preakness with National Treasure. But then he has the unfortunate breakdown. Well, and I will update, Luis Saez, thankfully, happily, was taken to the hospital. The negatives, the X-rays were negative, and he wound up okay, which is great news there. But again, the breakdown of the Baffert horse, certainly, as I've gone out and looked on the internet, has kind of captured the day. There are plenty of articles talking about the Preakness in the winter, but that situation, particularly given what we saw 2 weeks ago down at Churchill. So just talk about the day, and as that race number 6 happened, did that kind of cast a pall over the afternoon?
Yeah, it absolutely did. I was in the press box when that happened. I was watching the race. There's I'm sort of a balcony outside the press box at Pimlico, which gives you the best view of the track. And so I was out there, and I was talking with, I think, a friend of yours, Mike McAdam from the Schenectady paper. And just, sort of as that race was going off, the sun had just come out, and we were kind of saying, oh, isn't this nice? And then having a meltdown, broke down and had to be euthanized. And, that was done sort of in front of towards between the 8th and the quarter, but, on the front side. And it just, the air kind of went out of the building, is how it felt. And it's just, as a guy, I've owned horses. I've gotten that, I've had, I had one horse break down in a race. I've also gotten the call from vets, that this horse or that horse needs to be put down. And it's heartbreaking when it happens. It's a terrible, terrible byproduct of what racing is. And I just, I think for me and a lot of other people, I want to hear Bob Baffert say, every time something like this happens, I go back with my staff over everything and what did we do wrong and how can we get better? And I never hear him say that. I always hear some version of, poor me, this is a thing that happened to me. And, I wrote about this a little bit on the racingbiz.com. It's just like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear how hard it is to be you. I just don't care. And, so you may be triggering me here a little bit. Sorry,
no.
But it's just, I think people, all of us as human beings need to be aware of how the world sees us. Yeah. And I think racing sometimes has an epic lack of clarity on how the world sees us. And, what they see when there's 7 breakdowns at Churchill, when there's a breakdown at Pimlico, what they see is people killing horses. And we've got to do a better job of being responsive to those concerns, explaining what we're doing now and how we can get better. And we're just not good at it.
And we don't push the theme also that really that side of the game has improved quite a bit over the last few years, but it's hard to get that message out there after the last couple of weeks as well. But yeah, what you're saying, a lot of people are saying exactly the same thing about Baffert, and it's just the last 2 weeks have been a tough situation, certainly. So we will see going forward. But let's talk a little bit about the racing yesterday. And Bob Baffert got it done with National Treasure. We'll take a look at the. We're going to watch the entire Preakness here. I liked Perform. When I did the handicapping show yesterday, I said, boy, that Tessio was just so impressive. But this could go either way. He could live up to that Tessio and the fact that they were so ambitious they put up $150,000 to go into the Preakness, and I was kind of relying on that. So I went with Perform, but I said, on the numbers, maybe he's just going to turn out to be too slow, and that was maybe more the case. But we wound up getting a nice stretch duel. When we see him come into the stretch, it'll be number 1 National Treasure, number 7 Blazing Sevens. I didn't know what to do with Blazing Sevens. I had a feeling he would improve nicely off of what we've seen over the past couple of races. But they duke it out to the wire with National Treasure just pulling at Mage. A little bit of a disappointment running 3rd. Subsequently, I understand they've said they're not aiming with Mage for the Belmont. National Treasure comes out with a 98 buyer after the win yesterday. Red Route 1, the fractions being 23, 48, 113. Horses like Red Route 1 and Perform, tough to make up a lot of ground there. So Red Route 1 winds up 4th. Perform winds up 6th. What were your thoughts in the Preakness yesterday?
Usually when I talk with you after races, Seth, I'm giving you some version of, I like the horse that finished 5th. But yesterday, the Preakness developed pretty much exactly the way I thought it would, which was National Treasure would go, Coffee with Chris would be the closest pursuer, the pace would be slow. That was going to compromise Mage. The race, to me, the race broke down into 2 groups. There were 2 horses that had consistently shown speed, and one of them, National Treasure, was clearly better than the other. And then there were five, there's kind of a lump of five closers. Mage clearly the most accomplished of those. And to me, Blazing Sevens was the one that could jump up. And so that actually played out. So for once, I'm going to say I kind of saw this race just the way it happened. That won't be true many other times, as you know. But yeah, I mean, I thought, National, look, the Derby, the story of the Derby was pace makes the race. Wicked pace sets it up for the closers. Mage comes running and wins. The story of the Preakness, also pace makes the race. This time, slow pace, no pressure. The front runner is able to stay on. And it's not often you get the two Triple Crown races to play out sort of in exact mirror images, but that's what you got here. And National Treasure was able to gut it out. It was, if we can put aside all the other stuff, all the kind of attendant stuff around the Preakness, it was a heck of a horse race.
Yeah.
Those horses came home fast. From 6 furlongs home, they came home fast. They came home in just around 42 flat, which is very fast. So that was a heck of a horse race. It was a heck of a show those two horses put on.
Yeah, and it was a nice run by Mays. It was just on those fractions, he wasn't going to make it up. He was trying in the stretch, but he winds up, about 3 lengths back in third as the 7-5 favorite. I think a lot of the betting public was right with you because National Treasure goes off as the second choice. That's what we're talking about too. The odds were a little bit screwy. The win odds, when you look at the win odds as compared to the multi-race, the doubles and the pick threes and whatnot, those were a little more what you would expect, but the win odds were a little bit crazy. Eventually, we did have a couple of double-digit horses in there with Chase the Chaos and Coffee with Chris, but they were barely there at 10-1. Most of the day, most of the early betting, nobody was over double digits, which was very surprising. But as I say, if you looked at the multi-race will pays, probable pays, they were certainly more within line of what you would think. So the betting was a little bit intriguing. But yeah, I think a lot of people, given that the eventual odds and National Treasure as the second choice, saw what you saw. From the rail, he was going to leave. With the scratch-reduced field of only 7, he had the opportunity to control it all the way around and did. So, no shock there, I guess, for most of the bettors. I wasn't enamored with National Treasure. I had him in the mix, but I wasn't enamored. But I will say, one of the nice stories on the day, one of the good guys in the jockeys room, and I think all the jockeys nationally look up to him a little bit as kind of an elder statesman now, but Johnny Velasquez gets his first Preakness.
Yeah, no, that was certainly a nice part of the story. Good for him to get that. And it is amazing. I mean, his resume is incredible. And this was kind of like the hole in the donut. And now he's got the full thing. So that was good. And going into the odds for a minute, as you just referenced, it was nuts. I mean, I said to somebody, Chase the Chaos went off at 10-1. I said to somebody, there aren't enough zeros in the world to put after whatever the first number is with Chase the Chaos, because to me, I had as much chance of winning the Preakness as he did. And then Coffee with Chris probably should have been 30 or 40 instead of 10. And it was nuts. But the thing is, as a betting matter, so then you kind of end up like, is Mage bad value at 7-5 in that field? I don't think he is. So is, National Treasure at almost 3-1? That's pretty square. And Blazing Sevens at almost 5-1. Those are pretty square prices on those horses in this field. So, I always tend to default towards the long shots, but this was a good example of a race where you have your plan, but you got to look at the odds and you got to adapt based on what the betting public is doing.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and it was very funny all day long looking up at the odds, but particularly after Friday's betting, because we did the handicapping show yesterday, and there was already $1 million in the pool, and you think that's pretty good money, and the odds were screwy there. But then you looked at the Balck-Eyed Susan to Preakness double, and you realized, oh, okay, in those pools, people are being a little more realistic. But yeah, all day long and it wound up funny win pool yesterday. But as you say, that offers some other opportunities. All right, let's go a little bit earlier on the card. The James Murphy, a mile on the grass. I looked all around to try to beat Nagarock, and then when I eventually made my picks. I landed there. I thought Wonderful Justice could be a little bit of a player. Fantastic again, Circling the Drain, Trying the Turf was interesting to me, but I wound up kind of being right at a short price that Nagarok was just better than this bunch. Nagarok's the number 9 horse here as we watch him come down the stretch. Number 1, Fantastic again, does run second. Circling the Drain, again, Trying the Turf for the first time, winds up third in here. But Nagarok for Graham Motion, Flavian Prod on board, just too good for these. Chart margin winds up to be 3 1/4.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Seth. And in fact, he set a track record. There were 2 track records set on the turf yesterday. This one going 133.11 for a new record for a mile. And this was I thought Fantastic again ran great.
Yeah.
He set very fast fractions, and he stayed on willingly. I mean, he wasn't as good as Nagarok by any means, but he really stuck with it. And I thought Circling the Drain ran a really good race after getting pinched back early. Came running, wasn't a threat to the winner, but just about got second. So I thought the second 2 horses ran really credible races, and Nagarok he's that good. And once again, flattering the Transylvania Stakes where he had run in his prior start, finishing second. He comes back to win, and Webslinger, who was third there, came back to win the American Turf. So that race looks like a real race. This horse and Webslinger and a couple others in the American Turf look like they're probably the top of that class right now.
Yeah, Sal Cumin in the winner's circle, Matacat in the winner's circle again. Nice day for him with the Preakness as well. So the winning connections get it done. And Graham Motion, being a Maryland-based guy, interviewed in the winner's circle afterwards, seemed a little bit emotional. Winning on Preakness Day, seemed to appreciate that.
Yeah, no, he does. I've talked with him about that, and yeah, I mean, he's based at Fair Hill. He likes coming home and winning races, and he likes winning on the biggest day. Everybody likes to win on their track's biggest days, right? If you're stabled at Saratoga, you like to win on Travers Day. If you're stable in Maryland, you like to win on Preakness Day, and so it definitely has meaning. It's definitely something he points for. I think he said he had looked at the American Turf, but felt like it was a little too quick back for his horse, and so then you might as well just wait and come home and get the money when you're even money, and that worked out perfectly for him.
Yeah, looked good, and being a Graham Motion horse, I wouldn't be surprised to see him up at Saratoga a little bit later this year. A little bit earlier, the Maryland Sprint, the favorite at 8-5 was Straight No Chaser. I like that horse, had it in an underneath spot, though. I took a little shot with Wonder Where Craig Is, the Brittany Russell trainee. I'm a little bit disappointed. I wonder where Craig is. Went off at 7-2, but wound up 6th. I didn't use Prevalence. Prevalence is the number 2 as we watch him come down the stretch. But as I looked at the race more and more, I thought, boy, off of those bullet workouts, Prevalence at 6-1 is very dangerous. And he was kind of dangerous, but only to the rest of the field, because Straight No Chaser runs away here, wins by 7.5. Prevalence holds on for second by just a nose over a closing Nakatomi. But John Velasquez, once again, Straight No Chaser for Dan Blacker, a Southern California-based trainer, but had come over to Oaklawn and had won an optional claimer in the previous start with a triple digit. And I'm just looking at my list here. Oh, wow. I hadn't noticed that before, but I have the list of buyers from yesterday. Straight No Chaser yesterday, a 107 buyer. So validates what we saw down in Oaklawn. But that was a very nice performance yesterday in the Maryland Sprint.
I thought that was absolutely a scintillating performance. I mean, that he goes out fast, takes pressure, and just draws away effortlessly. That was really, really a big effort. And that's racehorse time. They went 108.27 for 6 furlongs. The track record is 107.70. That was Kofefi a couple of years ago. Prior to her, it was 109. So going 108-1 is really fast at Pimlico. And so that huge effort. But I'm going to be a little bit of a cynical old guy here. It's a My Racehorse horse. Can't they rustle up some silks? I mean, the horse runs in the house silks. It's like a Penn National shipper here. I mean, what is going on? Send your silks to Pimlico, My Racehorse.
And they must have a number of them because they have a number of horses, sir. That's a good point. But certainly, if you've got the micro share, you wound up very happy yesterday with a very impressive performance. And we'll have to see because, again, Dan Black are Southern California based, but has come east for the past couple of races. So we'll have to kind of see where they will go going forward there. But again, another nice win for John Velasquez on the day. All right, let me pull up the turf sprint, which was the race just before, and we are going to take a look at. I'm just pulling up my chart here. I think I have my charts out of order, unfortunately. So let me pull.
It was Beer Can Man.
Yeah,
it was Jim McKay.
Yeah, it was Beer Can Man. I'm just looking for the chart, but we'll go with that. The number 13 Beer Can Man getting it done over Nothing Better. I took a little shot in here. I thought That's Right was interesting, and about the top of the stretch, the number 6 That's Right we're seeing right here looked pretty good, but they're going to go by. And number 1 Nothing Better just cannot hold off number 13 Beer Can Man. So again, nice performance in the stretch, nice little stretch duel that winds up going to Flavien Prat, Phil D'Amato, and Beer Can Man. Your thoughts on the Jim McKay, as I mentioned his name earlier, turf sprint?
You did mention Jim McKay. Always happy to see Jim McKay referenced. And this was a good effort from this horse. It seemed like on the turn he was up close, and on the turn it seemed like the lead pair was getting away from him a little bit. But he was able to kind of fight back and get up by a neck. And Flavien Prat, who was on him, absolutely was pushing all the right buttons this weekend. I think he won 5 stakes over the weekend at Pimlico, and this being one of them. A couple of them were very close. This one obviously being pretty close. So it was, Flavien Prat and Johnny V pretty much cleaned up through the weekend. So good weekend for them in Baltimore.
Coppola runs third as the 2-1 favorite. And once again, we pull up my list of buyers. A nice 96 buyer for Beer Can Man. So solid number there, getting it done. Again, Flavien Prat, Phil D'Amato, the victory there. All right, let's go one race earlier. We'll take a look at the Ski Pat. Do you say Ski Pat or Skip At? We were having a discussion yesterday. We landed during the handicapping show. Ski Pat, right?
Ski Pat, yep.
Yeah, there we go. And that one, we're going to watch the stretch run there. I had a little bankroll promotion out here at the Clubhouse Racebook yesterday where I had some money to bet on behalf of some patrons that were randomly picked. And I had come into this race. We will talk in a moment about Never Explain winning at a big price in the prior race. I had singled Never Explain and gone all in the pick 3. So the team was just rooting for a long shot, and it played out perfectly here as number 8, Chitara gets it done at 17-1. Olivia Darling at 5-1 runs second. I'm the Boss of Me, who I had on top at 5-2, runs third in here. But a little bit of an upset in the Ski Pat with Chitara at 17-1, but a nice late run. You couldn't even see Chitara on the screen for a while. But when Chitara came into the screen, goes by and gets it done at a generous $36. Your thoughts on the Ski Pat?
Yeah, this was a nice effort from Chitara. She was wide every step of the way. She was about 3 wide around the turn. Came, as you just referenced, much wider in the stretch. I think she was about 6 or 7 wide, and came running at the end. You had 5 horses within a length and a quarter at the end, and I, as a local guy, I was kind of rooting for Princess Kokachin, who finished 4th. She made all the early running, but she's just really distance limited, and 6 furlongs at this level is about an inch too far for her. At 5.5, she wins. At 6, not so much. But it was an exciting finish. I mean, we were talking about sort of all the stuff around the weekend at the beginning of the segment, and all the stuff was all the stuff. But if anything redeemed it was the horses themselves in the races, many of which were just fantastic races.
No question about it. And we kind of mentioned some of her horses earlier, but I'll also toss out Brittany Russell as we were handicapping yesterday. It was funny because we talked about a Brittany Russell at one point. And looking at RPP, she was firing at this Preakness meet at 58%. And this was yesterday morning. And I said, well, these are older stats. So let me go back because I know she won a few yesterday on Friday. So while we were doing it, I pulled up the Equibase stats. She went 3 for 8 on Friday, which is 40-some%. But her percentage went backwards and wound up going into Saturday at 50%. But she's just been phenomenal past couple of years down there in Maryland.
Yeah, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I have not talked with her about this, so I don't have any insights. But I kind of wonder how long she stays in Maryland because, you know, she's getting a lot of like kind of the second tier or third tier, you know, Madaket horses, Rapoli horses. I mean, she's getting those sorts of horses, and you just wonder how long you're going to stay in Maryland if people are starting to send you $300,000-$400,000 horses. Yeah. You go to someplace like New York, and those might start being, you know, $1 million horses, and then you're in a very different spot in your career. So I do wonder if she's going to be long for Maryland, but as long as she's here, she's cleaning up. She's doing really, really well.
Yeah, that's actually what brought it up. It was a former Pletcher horse for Rapoli that had been sent down to her, and she'd done well with in a couple of starts. All right, let's go back and look at the dinner party. And as I said, this worked out nicely for me. In the bankroll promotion I had out on the front side, because I had played a pick 4 earlier, and my pick 4 ticket was already had a couple of winners. I was 2 deep already. This was the third leg, and I had Never Explain in my mix, but I didn't include it on the pick 4 ticket. And so I thought, I'm not going to kick myself when the Shug horse potentially wins at $32. So I did a pick 3 using Never Explain all. So that worked out eventually very nicely, but we're watching the stretch run here. Never Explain for Shug is the number 6 horse. This is a ding dong finish, half a length, head, neck, but works out on the right end for us with Never Explain. Flavian Prat, who you mentioned earlier, riding well. Hurricane Dream second. Emmanuel from Todd Pletcher runs third in here. Atone, who now has put in a couple of underwhelming performances. Again, he was in that scrum, but at 5-2 runs fifth after having won the Pegasus Turf earlier this year. But Shug gets it done at a price with Never Explain. Your thoughts?
You know, one sort of side note on the dinner party here, it was downgraded this year from grade 2 to grade 3. This is a heck of a field they put together for this one. It's not a big field, but, you know, you've got Atone, who's a grade 1 winner. You got Speaking Scout, who's a grade 1 winner. You got Emmanuel, who's a multiple graded winner. This was a really nice field. And this was another one of those Flavian Pratt presses the right buttons here. You know, basically the way this race developed, he's sitting off the pace a little bit, you know, kind of down inside, and about 2 lengths ahead of the favorite, Hurricane Dream. So he kind of gets the first jump on that horse, and that horse comes along and almost gets to him, but doesn't quite get to him. The win was Shug's 5th in this race. Used to be called the Dixie, changed to the dinner party a couple of years ago. But Shug has won 5 times in this race over a 30-year period. He won his first with Allure in 1993. Strange side note, all of the jockeys that have ridden dinner party winners for him are still active.
Oh, wow, that's wild.
Mike Smith on the first one in 1993. I can't remember who the others are at the moment. He's won 3 in the past like 8 or 9 years. Yeah. So some of there's a bit of a recency bias, but yeah, I mean, Mike Smith, some of these guys, we were talking about Johnny V earlier. Some of these guys do this for a really long time.
Yeah, no. And then, I mean, Mike Smith has become kind of an appointment type of a guy. But Johnny Velasquez is still out there. He's grinding it out. You know, you look at what he did up at Saratoga last year and the win total he he managed to put up as a Saratoga winning jockey last summer was great and in the winner's circle. And to watch him ride and for as long as he's been out there and having a day like yesterday, it's just incredible.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know how those guys do it. I mean, that's a really hard job, because as you know, Seth, you've got to be amazingly strong, amazingly agile and balanced. And at the same time, you can only weigh like 2 pounds, so to continue to be in that sort of physical condition and to maintain that kind of low weight, when you get in your 40s and 50s, as some of these guys are, it's incredible. Yeah. And obviously, like Johnny V, is still riding at the top of the game, and it's a pretty amazing accomplishment.
And I said it earlier, a nice guy too. It's always fun. He's always very accommodating if we need an interview or whatnot. And I know the rest of the jockey colony looks up to him now, and so always nice to see him do well. Speaking of jockeys and speaking of doing well, going back to the Gallarette, I had White Beam in the second spot. I thought Vergara might be a little bit interesting. Vergara went off at 4-1 and winds up right in the thick of things, but fades a little bit late to wind up 5th. And I knew White Beam for Chad Brown and Juddmonte was going to be a player. Betting public made it the 4-5 choice, and with Irod on board, eventually pulls away to 2.5 lengths. And it sounds like Chad has some high hopes for this one going forward. Now that the couple of starts in the United States, running second was Sopran Basilia for Graham Motion, and bipartisanship runs third in there. But White Beam looked pretty good. Again, it's Chad Juddmonte, so no shock that it was a nice performance. And I would think we'll hear a lot more from this 4-year-old filly going forward into the summer, and likely up at Saratoga as well. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It was a good-looking effort from White Beam, and I mean, Chad won a graded stake on the turf. Who would have guessed? I mean, we only see this in every graded stake on the East Coast, just about. So obviously, that's one to keep an eye out for. I think another horse to keep an eye out for a little bit is Graham Motion's horse there, Sopran Basilia. I had talked with him a few weeks ago. He had her entered in a race at Laurel that I think it was one of the stakes on the days that got canceled, and he said at that point, he thinks she's a horse that wants 10, 11, 12 furlongs, not a mile and a 16th, but you got to start somewhere. And she hadn't raced, and she ran exactly to me like a horse that wanted a little more ground. She was back early, made kind of a grinding run up in the second. I think as the races get longer, if he's right, and it looks like he probably is, she's a horse that's going to move up a little bit. So might keep an eye on her along with the winner going forward.
Yeah, an Italian transplant who hadn't been seen since October. So yeah, you factor in that layoff, and then the fact that Graham thinks wants longer. That was a nice performance from that one. I will note White Beam, a 94 buyer, and I didn't note it before, but Never Explained for Shug was a 96. Which was a lifetime best for Never Explained. So that one moving in the right direction, certainly. All right, let's go, and we'll pick up the Rivet after the unfortunate incident. We'll pick up the Chick Lang after the unfortunate incident. It is Rivet getting it done for Steve Asmussen. Hey, there's a shocker. Steve Asmussen with a talented 3-year-old sprinter. Rivet coming out of a couple of wins down at Oaklawn, including the Bachelor, gets it done. It'll wind up being a length and 3/4. Prince of Jericho second, Frosted Departure third. And again, earlier in the race, it was the unfortunate breakdown of having a meltdown. And as I said earlier, it seems like Luis Saez came out all right, which is good news. But your thoughts on the performance? You get Tyler Gaffleone on board Rivet, who once you get to this time of year, he rides very well down at Churchill, but gets a stakes win on the day at Pimlico as well. Your thoughts in the Chick Lang?
Yeah, no, Asmussen often does well over Preakness weekend. He told me a few years ago that he kind of pointed here because the Oaklawn meet, kind of the end of Oaklawn is sort of well timed, and he said he also thinks that that Oaklawn and Pimlico are fairly similar surfaces. So if he's got horses that are doing well down there, they're going to come up here and do well. And obviously, this horse ran kind of lights out. I mean, obviously the breakdown of having a meltdown had an impact since he was sitting second at the time. And this horse was able to kind of spurt away and then hold on. You talked about Brittany Russell a minute ago. A big effort from her horse with her husband Sheldon in the irons, Prince of Jericho, who they had been trying to make a two-turn horse, had run in the Tessio and run a couple other of the local stakes. I thought a very nice effort from him to close for second there, just a couple lengths behind the winner.
Yeah, and we spoke about the prominent owners she has gotten, and this one owned in part by Michael Dubb, who has seems like quite a few horses with her.
Yeah, he does. Dubb is active with horses down here, and she's getting, like we were talking about, she's getting a big shot here and doing very well with it. She's getting a lot of owners with deep pockets, and that's as that's for most trainers, that's going to be the key to success. Do you get people with deep enough pockets to get you the kind of horses that can win big races? And she's getting them.
Yeah, no, it's been interesting to watch over the past couple of years. And finally, kicking off the stakes action on Saturday, it was the Sir Barton. And, on a big day like this, kind of second stringers of 3-year-olds. Although after the race, I think Bob Baffert was maybe a little bit disappointed he didn't try the first string with Arabian Lion. Arabian Lion came in with only 1 win in 5 career starts, but kind of looked to lay over this field of second stringers, and that's exactly how it worked out. The chart margin will wind up being 4 lengths at 2-5. Arabian Lion, the number 4 horse here, running second. Tappett's Conquest. Dennington, the 6, runs third in the 5-horse field. But again, it was Arabian Lion kind of living up to the expectations of the betting public. We talked about the morning line at 2-5 when we were doing the handicapping show yesterday. And for a horse that only had 1 win in 5 starts, that seems short. But realistically, it looked like probably the betting public would go in that direction. And they did. He went off at 2-5, matching the morning line, and lived up to it. Your thoughts on the Sir Barton?
Yeah, I mean, Arabian Lion had run very well in the Lexington, just finishing behind First Mission, who a lot of people, and I would be one of those people, thought was going to win the Preakness before he scratched out of it. So, he obviously came into this race as a major player. I don't know. I don't know. At this point, it's unclear to me why the Sir Barton exists. It's a stake that's limited to 3-year-olds that haven't won a sweepstake. And, it is drawing the sort of second-tier horses, and maybe this is just my impression, but it feels to me like every year it's 4 or 5 horses and a Bob Baffert horse that's 1-5. And I'm sure Bob Baffert loves it, but I don't know what this is accomplishing exactly. But I did have to laugh. You talked about Arabian Lion, and after the race, Baffert might have been regretting it. But I was seeing people on Twitter before the race saying, "Oh, he should have sent him to the Preakness," and I was thinking, he runs the same race as National Treasure. You don't want 2 of the horses. You don't want the same horse twice in the race. And B, whatever you think about Bob Baffert, do you really think he doesn't know which of these horses is sitting on a Preakness winning race right now? So it was a sort of strange criticism I thought, or strange sort of second guessing. But, obviously this horse laid over the field and ran like it.
And speaking of Bob Baffert, let's go back and touch on a couple of the races from Friday and get your thoughts. And we'll look at the Balck-Eyed Susan stretch run. Tax will get it done here. The number 10 horse at 11-1, very generous 11-1 off a horse coming off a nice second behind Wet Paint in the Fantasy. Who's your filly? I did not know what to do with. Hadn't lived up to the 2-year-old season so far in the 3-year-old season. But given the 2 workouts coming in, I had a feeling Who's Your Filly would run well. She does running second. But Baffert disappoints in the Balck-Eyed Susan. Phasia at 3-5 can do no better than third. So it was kind of a mixed bag there. I think you had a nice kind of rebound from Hoosier Philly, but a disappointment from Phasia. And again, at a decent little price for a horse that had some potential. Tax gets it done. Your thoughts on the Balck-Eyed Susan?
Yeah, no, exactly. Phasia was just, it was really like just kind of a disappointing and just like sort of indifferent performance. Like,
yeah, there was never any point where you had much confidence.
Yeah, never looked like a winner. Never made really a strong bid. Came under a ride. Kind of midway on the turn and moved forward a little bit, but you could see the guy on Edgar Morales on Hoosier Philly was still, not asking for anything and was still holding her at arm's length. So not much from Phasia. I mean, the Baffert barn seemed a little puzzled. I think they expected better out of her. I thought Hoosier Philly, as you said, looked like a terrific 2-year-old. Hadn't really gone forward, but this was a very good effort, I thought. And but Taxed, one-time claiming horse, now a Grade 2 winner. That's a pretty nice journey there for for that ownership group and that trainer, Randy Morris and Richard Body, the owner.
And I always wonder in these situations what the people are thinking that let the horse get away, because you have to what did we do there? But yeah, clever claim for Taxed. And I think a couple of nice 3-year-old fillies to watch going forward. And I'm kind of happy for Tommy Amos to see the rebound for Hoosier Philly, but she's going to be fun to watch going forward as well. I wanted some thoughts also on, because you mentioned it earlier, with all the news coming into the week and whatnot, there was some negative things and positive things as well. But one of the positive things, as you said, was the horses and the racing. And boy, in the Pimlico special, you couldn't have asked for a better ding-dong battle. I liked Rattle and Roll. He was kind of a, second string stakes quality runner on the 3-year-old scene last year, and I liked him then. But he has come back as a 4-year-old, tossed in a triple digit in his 4-year-old seasonal debut down at the fairgrounds, but then won at Keeneland with another triple digit buyer. So I liked him going into the Pimlico special on Friday, but Speed Bias gives him all he can ask for. And it's one of those that had to be decided by the camera. Chart margins, a nose in here. But man, this was a nice performance for Ken McPeak's Rattle and Roll in the Pimlico special. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it sure was. And talking to Kenny after the race, he said, we said, did you think you won? And he said, well, I was standing like a 16th of a mile, sort of up the stretch, and it didn't look like it to me. But then the photo, it did look like it. I mean, that was a race that I was standing on the finish line, and I thought Speed Bias had held them off. So, I mean, that's how close this race was. And, this is one of those races, and, I asked Kenny about this. I said, this is a race that was arguably outside the Breeders' Cup the most important American 2-turn race for older horses for years.
Yeah.
This was a tremendously important race. Ton of Hall of Famers, horses of the year have won this race, and it's not there right now, and it hasn't been for a number of years. And I asked Kenny, does winning this race carry any meaning for you, or is this just another Grade 3 now? He said, no, this means a lot. I grew up watching those big horses win this race, and so this is really meaningful. And Ron Moquette, who trained Speed Bias, said basically the same thing. Said, I remember watching Mineshaft win this in '93. This is one I've always wanted to win, and so I really, and Kenny said, we need to get this race back to being a Grade 1, and I think everybody in Maryland would love to see that. It's going to take some work, but so much history in the Pimlico special, and this race, these aren't the best horses that have won it by any means, but this is about as good a horse race as you're ever going to see.
Yeah, and I know last year West Point and Shug won with First Captain, and I know they were kind of the same. This race has such history. And still $250,000, and that's very nice too, to pick up the better part of a $250,000 purse. And again, for my list of buyers, Rattle and Roll his third triple-digit buyer in 3 starts so far this season. He had a 101 in the Pimlico Special. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on one more race on Friday that I thought was a lot of fun. I talked about it a little bit yesterday, but I also wanted to pull up the replay because Jeremiah Engelhardt goes down to Baltimore for the Miss Preakness 3-year-old filly sprinters on the Balck-Eyed Susan Day. These are the sprint side of that 3-year-old filly division. Key of Life certainly looked very tough for Brad Cox, but Maple Leaf Mel comes in from Jeremiah Engelhardt, August On Farm, which is, of course, the nom de plume of Bill Parcells. 3 for 3. She had debuted up at Saratoga and looked fabulous, then won a state-bred stake up at Saratoga, laid off after that, and came back and won a state-bred stake back in March. But she appears down in Maryland Friday afternoon, $150,000 up in the Grade 3 Miss Preakness, and Maple Leaf Mel gets it done. And she has written things for you, I know, but she had a nice article in our paper up here, Mike McAdams' paper, the Daily Gazette. Teresa Gennaro wrote a nice article about the connections, and it's named after a former assistant for Jeremiah, who has now gone off on her own, but she's staying together with this horse and Jeremiah wherever this horse goes. So that was a lot of fun to read. That she's the kind of the horse is the namesake of her Maple Leaf Mel. So it was a nice performance, great for the New York bred program, and again one of the better stories on the weekend.
Yeah, this was I thought a really good performance.
Yeah.
This was really impressive. I mean, she opened up on him in the stretch. And honestly, I was, I kind of tossed this horse. I said, well, she's been beating the state breds and nice speed figs, but let's see how she fares against, a little bit higher class of open company. Well, answered that question. She fared really well. I thought that was a very big performance, and I'll be interested to see where she turns up next and what kind of horses she races against, because she looks like a horse that clearly open company, Grade 3 company, no problem. So it seems like there's more in the tank there.
Yeah, the coach, the Bill Parcells, had some nice 2-year-olds up at Saratoga last year. This being maybe the best of the bunch now. But as a New York bred, boy, they have all kinds of opportunities because they can kind of pick their spots there if they want to. But now you got a Grade 3 winner, so you can pick some spots. I'll be interested to see where they go as well. Jeremiah and Bill Parcells, Joel Rosario on board, and a lifetime best buyer with a 90 with that win in the Miss Preakness. So yeah, it was definitely on the track, and watching the performances, there was a lot to like over the 2 days of racing down at Pimlico. And as always, we advise people once again, if they want to keep up with Maryland racing amongst racing in the Mid-Atlantic, the racingbiz.com, Frank's website. Frank, before we let you go, though, we alluded to it earlier, but I've kind of been asking everybody's opinion since in the 2 days after the Derby and subsequently, but those 2 days after the Derby, certainly, there was a lot of conversation on social media. You said there was conversation on the backstretch, the Triple Crown schedule. We only got the one performer of the Derby this year. Is that an aberration or a trend? I can go either way. I used to be a traditionalist, but now I could see spacing it out. But I've also noted this is a multi-level kind of a conundrum in that, maybe the trainers and horses want the extra time, but we also have to convince the authorities down in Maryland and in New York as well, is that their best business decision? What are your thoughts on expanding the Triple Crown, the schedule?
The short answer, the shortest answer is I'm in favor of it.
Yeah.
The longer answer is, look, it's a complicated equation, and probably the kind of two of the most important elements that we sometimes talk about. One of them, which is, can you keep the public's attention for an expanded Triple Crown? If it goes to 3 weeks and 3 weeks, that shouldn't be an issue. If it were to go to, say, 4 weeks and 4 weeks, which Tom Chukas had proposed a number of years ago, do you keep the public's attention? And that's a question you got to sort of wrestle with. And then, of course, your TV partners, because these races make a lot of money off the TV deals, off selling those TV rights. And if NBC were to say, you can't move it, then you probably can't move it. So that's a piece of the equation. I think another thing, though, here's what I'd like to see. If it were my ideal, Maryland's got to do, it's not just moving the Preakness. It's a 3-part deal. You move the races so they're farther off the Churchill races. You've got to get the Pimlico situation resolved. The state of the facility has moved from bad to worse to unacceptable. You've got to get this fixed. And then the third thing is you've got to repurpose a lot of your stakes money into undercard races on Balck-Eyed Susan Day and Preakness Day. Because what you want to create is a scenario where a horseman runs his race in, say, the Turf Classic at Churchill, which is a grade 1 with a big purse. You want that guy to say, now I'm going to go to the dinner party because it also has a competitive purse. Now they're not, because the dinner party is 200 or 250. So you're drawing from a different group of horses. You want to create a situation where people perceive a series, not just of the Triple Crown, but there could be a series of, the Special and the Brooklyn or whatever it is, whatever the 2-turn race is at Belmont and at Churchill, or the Oaks and the Balck-Eyed Susan and the Acorn. You want to create a situation where people can perceive all of these or several of these, but the Maryland Jockey Club's got to put money into those races to do that. So it really, to me, again, to wrap up, is 3 things. Move the dates so there's more time between, more money into the stakes races, fix up Pimlico.
Yeah, and you brought in two great points that add layers to this. The one I hadn't really thought about, but you're absolutely right. You got to get the television partners to buy into it. But the second one, and we've talked about this the past couple of weeks on the handicapping show, Anthony Mormino and I, the moving it helps the undercard stakes for both tracks, both Pimlico and Belmont, because then maybe it becomes a series for some of these other divisions as well. And so you'll fill those up with some nice horses potentially also. So yeah, it's a complex problem. As I say, I can kind of go either way. I'm starting to tilt more now towards, though, expand it out. And I'll ask you, and I'm sure you probably have exactly the same feeling, because you read on Twitter the people who say, well, the Triple Crown's supposed to be hard. And we say in here on the Handicappers Report, when we've talked about the past couple of weeks, expanding it isn't going to make it any easier. I think you're going to have the Preakness and Belmont stakes are going to wind up to be fuller, tougher fields.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, wouldn't the Preakness have been a harder race if 2 Phils had come and Angel of Empire had come? Of course it would. I mean, 2 Phils was probably best in the Kentucky Derby. So, you'd like to see that. But I also think, in some sense, it's supposed to be hard is a non sequitur. Yeah, it's supposed to be hard. And as you said, it will continue to be hard. That's not why I want to change the dates. It will always be hard because these are the best races for 3-year-olds in the country. So that's always going to draw, the money's going to be there. The horses are going to be there. But to me, it's like, look, as somebody, and I know you're the same, as somebody who loves horse racing, we get 2, 3, or at most 4 opportunities a year to speak to the public that is not totally in love with horse racing. That we get the Derby, we get the Preakness, we get the Belmont, maybe the Breeders' Cup. That's it. Those are the only races in the country that anybody who doesn't love horse racing cares about. We should be doing everything we can to put the best show on that we can on those 4 days. And the way things are now, the Derby puts on, a great show, lots of top quality races. Preakness has 1 grade 1 on 2 days, and then Belmont has a whole bunch of them. And, Maryland's got the money to put into the stakes to put on that kind of show, but it can't right now because it doesn't have the money that Churchill has or Belmont has. And since Churchill's first and Belmont's last, it's stuck in the middle. So they have smaller purses and they get, the second tier of horses. Wouldn't it be good for the sport if we just had, the best possible show in all three of these events. And that's what's best for racing to me. People say, oh, it might hurt the Haskell or the Travers. And I love those races. I've been to both of them multiple times. Those are two of my favorite tracks. I love Monmouth. I love Saratoga. You and I have sat and had beer at Saratoga on more than one occasion. But in terms of how we reach the general public, the Haskell and Travers are not important. They just, and I know that's sacrilegious in upstate New York. And I love the Travers, and it's a very important race in the racing ecosystem. But in terms of how we speak to the public, the Triple Crown races matter, and no other races really do.
No, I think that's all legit, and I'm sure the conversation will now continue. And it'll be interesting to see how the racing industry responds, because typically it's a little slow. It's hard to get it pushed and get the momentum going in a certain direction. So we shall see, but the conversation will continue. And speaking of conversation, Frank, always appreciate when you come on. Kind of an extended hour today, but had plenty to go over with the weekend down at Pimlico. And again, people can check out the racingbiz.com for more coverage of Maryland and Mid-Atlantic racing. But again, as I say, Frank, really appreciate it this morning, and we'll talk again.
My pleasure, Seth. Always enjoy talking with you, and thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. Frank Vespe, the racingbiz.com. Check it out. We'll take a break. I'll come back for a little short segment. I'm going to do the Dark Horse Play of the Day when we come back, so stay tuned.
Horse player, to have a better knowledge of the game, to be more successful. What if there were a way to take what you've learned, what you know, and make better decisions, better choices? In horse racing, knowledge is a powerful tool. Race results and replays, past performances and live streaming, wagering from all your digital devices. Capital OTB. Become a better horse player.
No matter where in the world you are, the excitement of wagering on horse racing is just a click away. You'll get live streaming, past performances, race replays, our virtual tote board, analysis and selections from professional handicappers, a simple, safe, and secure wagering platform, and best of all, you get track prices. CapitalOTBBet.com. Bet any place, anytime at CapitalOTBBet.com. And be sure to download our new mobile app from the iTunes Store or Google Play.
Capital OTB is now streaming live on Roku. The RTN Racing channel on Roku lets you watch OTB TV live through your Roku device or your Amazon Fire Stick, rather than being limited to computers and mobile devices, which means you can now watch OTB live wherever you are. Simply open Roku, scroll to find the RTN channel, then click on OTB TV. OTB TV on Roku. Try it now.
Welcome back. Time now for the Dark Horse Play of the Day, brought to you by the Dark Horse Mercantile up in Saratoga. Again, we want to thank the folks at the Dark Horse for their sponsorship of this segment, and invite you to stop up. They're right on Broadway. Stop in, some racing memorabilia, apparel, and much, much more. Again, you'll have a great time browsing around the Dark Horse Mercantile, and go down the street to their sister store, Impressions of Saratoga. You'll spend a long time browsing in there as well. So if you're up walking around on Broadway, grabbing some dinner, or just enjoying a nice afternoon, the Dark Horse Mercantile and Impressions of Saratoga. Dark Horse Play of the Day for today. I was going to look at one of the turf races, and I just went online, and it looks like they're going to be off the turf again today at Belmont. So I had a secondary dirt race picked out, and that's the 9th today at Belmont. State Bred Maiden Specials. I'm going to make my Dark Horse Play of the Day in the 9th race, the number 4, North End Lady. First-time starter for Balck-Eyed. And Balck-Eyed isn't known for firsters, but can have them ready. But I was attracted to Violence on top. There's a little bit of breeding on the bottom side as well. So, again, a win early sire, a little bit of breeding overall. But more importantly, comes in with a bullet workout. And I'm wondering if that's signaling intent. The bullet workout was really just a few days ago. So, again, I'm wondering if they're signaling a little intent with the workout there, that this horse will be well met. That said, 7 furlongs first time is a little bit tough, But we're looking at 6-1 on the morning line. I would think we'll get that. I wouldn't even be shocked if we saw a little more value. But I do think this could be an interesting first-time starter from Barclay Tag. So our dark horse play of the day for this afternoon, race number 9 at Belmont Park, horse number 4, North End Lady. All right, we will wrap it up for this Sunday edition of Racing Across America. As you can see, wrapping up Preakness weekend as far as the morning programming is concerned. Hopefully you've enjoyed some of the conversation we've had, and hopefully, more importantly, you've cashed some tickets over the last couple of days, Balck-Eyed Susan Day and Preakness Day. I mentioned it earlier when I was talking to Frank. Thanks to everybody who showed up yesterday in the clubhouse race book, the folks who participated in the bankroll. Everybody walked away with a little bit of money. I had the nice pick 3 that played out very well. Started with Never Explain at $30. Then we got Chitara at 30, and then the horse that hit the last race was a little bit of a shorter price. But for 50 cents, got $6.50 back for the pick 3 wager. Hit a couple other trifectas, hit the late pick 4, which didn't really pay much. But everybody walked away on the bankroll team with a little over $30, I believe, of free money. So we appreciate your coming down and having a fun afternoon, and hopefully cashing some tickets and getting a little extra if you were on the bankroll team yesterday. So again, thanks to everybody who showed up. We'll keep you informed on upcoming bankrolls as well. There'll be a little happy hour bankroll coming up a couple of weeks, I think, on a Friday, but we'll certainly talk about that and promote that as it comes up. Otherwise, going to, as I say, wrap it up, be back in probably about an hour and a half or so for OTB Live on a Sunday afternoon. I'll take a look at a little Belmont and Churchill, probably throw a little Saratoga harness in the mix as well. So cross-breed, 2-breed OTB Live on a Sunday afternoon. But as I say, we'll be back again in about an hour and a half or so to kick that off. So Seth Merrow wrapping it up for Sunday morning on Racing Across America. Appreciate you tuning in. Tune back in a little bit later this afternoon for OTB Live. We'll see you then.
It only takes one upset to make history, and now you can be part of Saratoga's long tradition at the Dark Horse Mercantile. The Dark Horse Mercantile offers a carefully curated selection of clothing, gifts, and home decor, from one-of-a-kind vintage racing memorabilia to select brands like Barber and Under Armour, as well as exclusive Dark Horse branded merchandise. So celebrate the Dark Horse in all of us at the Dark Horse Mercantile, downtown Saratoga, where the smart bet is always the Dark Horse. Capital OTB is now streaming live on Roku. The RTN Racing channel on Roku lets you watch OTB TV live through your Roku device or your Amazon Fire Stick, rather than being limited to computers and mobile devices, which means you can now watch OTB live wherever you are. Simply open Roku, scroll to find the RTN channel, then click on OTB TV. OTB TV on Roku. Try it now. We would like to thank Woodbine for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB. Woodbine's 2023 Thoroughbred Stakes program has more than $17 million in purses, including 39 graded stakes, 5 Grade 1 events, and 2 $1 million classics, the King's Plate and the Woodbine Mile. Woodbine, now through December, great racing north of the border.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off-Track Betting.